Alright, hello everyone, my name is Disc, and in this video we have a level 12 City of Threads without any affixes. So if you're new to my channel, thanks for tuning in. This is mainly a Mythic Plus channel and I try and put out new videos at least once per week. The goal here is to kind of give a little insight into how I approach min-maxing our spec. I also teach private lessons on Metafy.gg. I've been having a lot of really good success over there, getting a lot of things done. So please go check out my offerings on Metafy if you're interested in a one-on-one private lesson, or if you're interested in any of my UI elements, please consider joining the channel as a member. There should be a little button under the video. But I've had a really good week for keys. I have all my 12s and broken into 13s, which has kind of given me a new perspective on things. But I do want to keep this intro short, but as usual, I do want to quickly flash the talents here and talk about some different choices I've made. So for City of Threads, this is a must. We have to have Mass Dispel. So also when it comes to our rotation and what's important to us, I'm now dropping Rhapsody. It's a nice spell, but there are just so many more important things we can do than press a Rhapsody. I feel like it kind of bogs down the rotation having to think about one extra spell to cast. So what I've done is, now that I'm getting into higher keys, I'm reconciling this point and I'm actually banking in a little more defense. There are a lot of really hard-hitting attacks, and buffing with Light's Inspiration, it buffs our shield wall. It does quite a bit just for helping keep you alive. I know a lot of people would take maybe Throes of Pain into Improved Fade, but that is just not something I'm willing to do yet. I think Translucent Image is pretty good on its own, but in talking about defensives, it's a mini game in and of itself that you, like as a player, really have to be vigilant about playing these. You have to use Fade anytime there's group-wide damage, or definitely anytime you're targeted with single target damage. And I use Fade and Desperate Prayer on the same keybind, and it's pretty easy to cycle between them. I do have Fade on its own keybind, so I can desync them on purpose. But food for thought, this is a minigame in and of itself. When I watch a lot of people play Discipline, I notice their defensives go unused. So this is an area of high focus, especially as you're getting into more difficult keys. So over on the Discipline side, really nothing's changed here. I'm still running Borrowed Time. I think this is helping me get my Torment average higher, which is important to me. And I'm taking that over Dark Indulgence, which I look at as a chance to empower our Rift. So when you're going into Mind Blast, some of the times you already have a proc. So I just feel like this isn't 100% guarantee, because you can get it naturally. So I'm going into Borrowed Time, and that's really helping me get over the hump of my first round of Torments. Potentially with more gear and more haste, I'll revert. I think this is a pretty free way to increase your output, but having a lower Torment average is a pretty big loss as well, in my opinion. So then here is a splash of the damage output. This is really important to monitor as a Disc Priest, because this is our healing. So I'm at 412,000 per second, which is a pretty good benchmark. I'm liking to aim for over 400 every time. Really feel like I'm doing my job in that case. I've had keys where it verges closer to 500, and I think that's just the profile of the dungeon. But we have the Pet on top, thanks to the Borrowed Time, I think. And then the Rift on second. You really always want these vying for first and second place in a great lead over all of our other spells. So we see the Void Blast next. I think that's just the profile of the dungeon, followed by Dark Reprimand. Dark Reprimand is a huge spell for us. We really have to make sure we're playing our Radiance often. You can take that one step further and make sure you're playing your Radiance on the correct person. And then when it comes to our pet window, we're aiming for 6, 7, or 8 Torments if we can. And if you wanted to take that conversation one step further, it's not just about getting your Torments, but it's in getting them in the right time. So I'm really using Bigwigs to my advantage. I have a weak R for tracking cooldowns for trash mobs, and kind of simply put, the Rift is going to last about 11 seconds, and you want the collapse to happen sometimes before and after an attack, and sometimes just after an attack. And we'll see examples of both here, but it's really all about timing. So knowing that it's an 11-second timer, I use my Bigwigs, which is really limited in a whittled down list. I don't really want to track any attacks that don't have to do with timing my spells. I just don't see any purpose in tracking timers of spells that don't have to do with timing my spells. So a less is more approach with these tracking add-ons and that's really going to help you. And then really all you have to do is once you get your rift out, make sure you cast a radiance during the rift window. Personally, I try and get my 3 blasts out of the way first for the extension. I backload the radiance, and then everyone's covered through the collapse and after the collapse with a delayed radiance. So as we watch this video, pay attention to all the different mini games of Discipline. These are the areas where you're really going to get the most out of your spec if you're playing into all these mini games. So I'm switching targets to spread my dot with penance, switching target to find executes, using focus targeting to fall back to my schism target, playing Radiance after my rift, playing Radiance on the best person centralized in my cluster, the mini game of defensives, and the very important mini game of timing our spells, using bigwigs and weak R's to time our spells. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and clip over to the key. Alright, here we go. So this dungeon has a lot of really interesting play of spells, really fun with our timers. It took me quite a few tries to really understand the cadence of the incoming damage, so let's watch for that. But my biggest change to my UI, this was per request of a lot of my viewers, I changed my cast bar to help see globals. I really don't like those global trackers, but I think this is a good compromise. So please let me know if it helps you track what's happening. It is a native cast bar with a weak aura to also show globals and spells off globals. Alright, so going into these next handful of pulls, they're all kind of the same. I'm only tracking one spell on the big Beetle's nameplate, the Darkest Red. This is the swarm attack where we need to play our spells. It's all about the timing. It's also all about defensives. So the pet is out, the rift is out, and I queue in Fade as a 10% damage reduction. Switch targets to preserve my dots, switch targets to catch executes. 6 torments. Okay, so I don't have pet, but I do have rift and barrier. So, get that rift out. So the boss, or I'm sorry, the mob is about to die, but I can still send rift. So I sent it out and used my cancel R macro to get the damage grab. It is pretty free of a spell, and it will regen. It'll cool down in plenty of time before the next. Okay, so this pull is kind of the same, except we also have dispels. A rule of thumb is you kind of want to wait a second on the dispel. Opening with a couple of dots. Watching for the swarm attack. And here goes my pet window. Queue and Fade. Radiance during the rift. A semi delayed dispel. And 7 torments. And also, for the record, dispel is spelled D-I-S-P-E-L. It is like the most common misspelled word in Warcraft. I don't know why. Even Details misspells it. Look at the meter down there. But yeah, 1L. Okay, so same pull as last, or the one before rather. Tracking the timer of the swarm to time my pet window. Pet is out, rift is out. Here come the swarm. Queue and Fade as my defensive choice. Couple of executes for 7 torments, and here comes the next swarm. We have darkness. Rift is out as a half window. And that, I think, was one of 2 fear examples I have in this dungeon, using the aqua bars on nameplate plus the aqua weak aura under fear. Also, the fear icon glows if it's available with the trumpet sound. So it's really important to maximize that spell. Playing utility is really how you'll stand out from the crowd. And time keys. And just take that one step further. So my damage window was ending back there. The next best thing you can do after you can't heal anymore is prevent damage. So after a window is a great time for a fear, just as a rule of thumb. Okay, so we have to have something for every B attack. This one looks like I'm queuing in Rapture. The delayed dispel. I think a lot of people say dispel, but it's a dispel. D-I-S-P-E-L. It's like my biggest pet peeve in WoW, people that can't spell that word. Okay, on this boss, buckle up, I do really bad. But on open, we don't have any deaths, we get through it, but you'll see. On open, we want to throw a pet window. I'm only tracking the vociferous indoctrination. We also have delayed dispels here. We are in Discord, so I'm calling it, but I think 2 paladins throws me off because I use the colors of the party nameplates. Here dispels. Oh. Lay on hands. The only reason I lived there is because of the paladins. So ideally here, we would have had a half window rolling. But I had to recover. And there was a paints up on the tank. Anticipating the tank slam, we see the targeted cast weak aura, highlighting him white. It's a great opportunity for paints up if necessary, at least a shield. And then on these, it's good practice I think when you're in lower keys, but higher keys it's a must. We have to know when to use defensive penance, and this is one of those fights. So the idea is I'll wait a second and a half or 2, dispel the first mechanic, and then I flood a defensive penance plus a wheel and woe shield into the second dispel. Let's see how I do it here. So I play a radiance early on purpose, defensive penance plus a wheel and woe shield. So that's about the best single target we can do. Here goes a half rotation. Fade is used. And anticipating this tank slam, lead in with a rapture. And then here I rapture the full team, leading in with a radiance. Shields will hit harder if they're atoned due to mastery, so a radiance first before rapture is a pretty good idea. And in hindsight, I think I could have played this rapture a little better. There's I'm still getting used to the change of the spell, but there's a really nice play with it since you can kind of hold on to your shields. I should have shielded the tank for the slam and then just held the rest. For the person with the second dispel mechanic, it's a really fun play where you stagger shields between the ticks of damage. Pretty pro, and you can honestly mitigate full attacks. So dispel early, followed by a defensive penance. Half rotation. Worked in a radiance after the rift. And this boss is almost done, thank God. Just pretend like none of that happened.
Buffoon. Not even worthy of the 5th strand.
So coming up, this next area of the dungeon we have is called Shadow Step. Is that what it's called? It's the bleeds that hit the group. So really all I'm doing here is I'm banking spells, tracking the timer on his nameplate, and we really want to have spells rolling for each one. Okay, so that was not my best play in retrospect. It looks like I led in without full atonements in party. But for this next one, I believe I do a Rapture leading in with Radiance. Radiance into Rapture for the mastery. Here goes a Rapture just to kind of soften it. And really just making sure I wait for the Absorb to deplete before I refresh it. Here goes a half window. So I do believe at this point, with the mob almost dead, I'm opting just to hold my pet, but I will freely send my Rift. What you don't want to happen is the pull end and the pet not have a chance to get CDR. There was a fade before that one landed. And another good thing to always think about with these attacks, these group-wide and single-target attacks that we are facing, we always want to roll a defensive. Desperate Prayer and or Fade. So a huge minigame, especially as you're getting into higher keys. They don't have globals, so it's really good to be in good practice of using them. So I like targeting the Eye of the Queen, even though the other one is darker red. I should change that. But we have full atonements in party. I did not have any defensives except Fade, so I gave myself a personal pain sup with a well-timed pet window with a radiance in between. Okay, so 3 seconds away on the next one. I pre-shielded. Let's see, and I go into a rift window. So all we have is a rift. That, for the most part, is enough. Getting a couple extra executes to sustain a little bit. And a Radiance out of combat is one of my favorite new plays. So if you look at my Radiance icon, it has a little timer circling around it. That timer marks the duration of my Harsh Discipline. It's a 30-second buff, pretty easy to hold, but now, leading into the next pull, my Radiance has reset, the mana has recovered. I can cast another Radiance and have a double proc. So let's see if I drop the double proc or not. Got the double proc. Okay, so I set my focus early. Atonements are in party. Double defensive window, Desperate Prayer and Fade. Pet is out, Rift is out. Radiance during the Rift. Which looks like I don't have any dots. So I had to break from damaging to dot. That's really never something you want to do. I would call that a slight miss in my rotation. It's better to open with dots. Rapture to cover these guys. Casting a dot mid window is kind of one of the worst ideas. It's a lot of loss. While your pet is out and while your rift is out, there's so much more value from your other spells. You never really want to cast dots, mid window like that, but for a pack of 3, I felt like it was worth it. I think I had haste, so I didn't lose any torments. Someone might have to check me on that. Oh yeah, I figured out how to do that too. So really good for Missive Tyrna Scythe, just side note. I like using that macro to place all the world markers at once. It kind of turns it white. Kind of cool. And always good practice to check your cooldowns before combat so you can kind of plan your next play. So I believe on this one I combo Barrier and Vampiric Embrace. Yep, there they go. Health potion there, wasn't quite ready. Barrier with Fade were my defensive choices. And a pet window. Let's see how I play the next one. So 3 seconds away. Looking at my spells, I have Desperate Prayer and Pain Sup. Nothing else. Yep, so I Desperate Prayed and Pain Sup before it landed. And that's really the name of the game, is we have to press our offensive spells, but we have to press our defensive spells. And really at the end of the day, there's not much to it. There's just 2 of them. You can put them on a single keybind as a macro, and they'll cycle back and forth. So Fade is 30, Desperate Prayer is a minute 30. So you can put those on one button, and it's pretty easy to cycle through them. But every time you get an attack, you should be pressing a defensive. Especially with Translucent Image, the 10% is quite honestly huge. I think I used to underestimate that value. Let's see, I'm holding a Harsh Discipline. I'm looking at the Radiance timer. I tried to let it sink low, and then I cast it the second time to get a double proc. And we still have quite a bit of time here on boss. There's no reason in the world not to go into boss without a double proc. So let's see, I'm waiting for the Harsh Discipline timer to kind of tick down. I'm also waiting for the spawn to get a little bit closer. So boss is 10 seconds away. Go ahead and cast the second Radiant, just have a double proc here. And on open, we have the freedom just to do a pet window. We have dots in party. All I'm tracking are the ice sickles and rhyme dagger. The bleeds in party we can see with targeted casts and the bleed weak aura. So white is before they hit, red is after they hit. I'm kind of expecting those. I'm not really doing anything else to track them except that small visual. But here on the ice sickles, we really want defensive. So I go Desperate Prayer, Fade. And this is the Mass Dispel. I could have done a lot better there with the Mass Dispel, but no deaths is really all that we needed. And right here, it is not a great phase for the Rift, but you can kind of go ahead and send one of those anyway just for the damage grab. So here comes the Rhyme Dagger. This is a place where I want to do Long Atonements and Party first and cast my pet literally right after the first tick of damage, because there's 2. So there was the first hit in group, then I cast my pet, and with delaying it that much and working a Radiance middle of my Rift after the second hit, the Rift is out, the pet is still out, and it covers everyone for both of those attacks, and 6 torments for the win. Critiquing myself, I did let my dots drop off, but there were other things to focus about, not the biggest problem. And here goes a Mind Blast, just getting a senseless damage grab. You can still whack the Schism, but your Rift is not really getting that much value. Okay, so we have a little time to kill here. Let's see how I play. I'm actually interested to see how I do this. So I'm looking at the Ice Sickles, 13 seconds away. So I play my pet a little bit early. My thought here was the best defense I can offer to the party at this point without Mass Dispel is making sure everyone's full health and a barrier. Both defensives and a single Dispel for the win. Yeah, so I played my pet and Rift there. For the Rhyme Dagger, it's a little bit different, but for the Ice Sickles, the most defense you can give a party is just making sure people are full health leading into the attack. So I played my pet right before the Icicles. Here's my second PI. Easy to miss your second PI in combat. And we have a Rhyme Dagger about to happen. Everyone's fully atoned. Fade was played. And I cast my pet right after the first group wide hit, and then a pre-casted Radiance before the second hit, and that's really the best you can do. Full health. It's all about timing there, and I think it's really fun when you delay a window like that. So really all you have to think about, and I think this applies for lower keys too, just play your pet Rift window right after the first Rhyme Dagger hit. And then the goal is to kind of play your Radiance after the second Rhyme Dagger hit. Let's see. Let's send a Rift here. Fade just to kind of help out. What are y'all thinking about my cast bar? I think it's really nice, especially if you've not seen it yet. When I proc a combat potion, or use a combat potion, the cast bar has a nice little cute glow on it. I just think it's so nice. It's my favorite addition so far. So opening with dots, Long Atonements and Party. The last thing I do is shield for Words of the Pious and Borrowed Time. I get my Torments on cooldown first, followed by my Dark Star. Looks like my dots running out. Switch targets to preserve dots. Switch targets for executes. And 6 Torment window. Could have been a 7, but honestly 7 and 8 are pretty difficult to do. Not sure if I've gotten any so far. Let's see if I can see. So my pet is not ready. I really need to just do some spamming. I actually came back naturally. So noticing with grade 2, I've never really talked about this. There is an aggro indicator. It's that small red line. So I don't track every single spell with the targeted cast weak aura, but a lot of the minor spells will still highlight my frame. And in that case, I was just kind of queuing flash heals and shields into myself. I kind of saw it coming. Here's PI, Pet. And on this one, I went for Rift first. So with a lot of lesser mobs like this, I go Pet Rift. Generally, I go Pet Death. But I'm kind of just wanting to go for a damage grab, and the Rift is huge. So I want to get it out a little quicker. Even one cast quicker is more. So it's kind of a pliable rotation. Sometimes I go Pet Death Rift Penance, and sometimes I go Pet Rift Penance Death. And I think there is a slight difference there, and kind of knowing when to switch your rotation is important. We have our Renew on Tank, Long Atonements and Party. Pet Rift Penance, then Death, then Star. Radiance after my Rift. I have some executes potentially. And 7 torments. I got my executes, but I did miss the dot spread. And that might be my only fear example in this dungeon, but using my KUI nameplates, all fear opportunities are aqua. We see quite a few here, but I have a weak R to cue a trumpet sound and an aqua bar under my fear and a glow on my fear to kind of go in tandem with it. But the weak R fades out when your fear is on cooldown. Yeah, so the thought is if I'm hearing a trumpet sound, that means I need to play fear because it's up. Okay, so on this guy, we have the one attack on his nameplate. We really just want to get into our pet window quick using a defensive. I got my Rift out followed by a Radiance before the move. Kind of crucial. So even though I front-loaded my Radiance there, everyone is still covered through the collapse. So the main order of business was get my Rift out and the Radiance out before the dance. And on this one, it's a play I really love. Is sending the Rift out and just letting it kind of be a passive ability and playing Rapture on top of it. And that's what I did there. So we do have Poison Dispels in group. Something to remember, if you're coming into this dungeon without Poison Dispels, you're going to lose. You really need to have Poison Dispels, and we have 3. Okay, on this boss, we have a little bit of time before the queue of our pet window. We will see the timer on the nameplate. There it is, 15 seconds. So I open just with a healthy coverage of dots. I get my star out for the damage grab. We do have some lesser mobs here. Actually, it looks like a couple of Holy Novas just for play. PI's out, and here comes the damage. I don't have any defensives available, but this is honestly quite a minor attack. Still important. Yeah, there's the glow on my cast bar. I love that. Quite a minor attack, but still you kind of just have to make sure you time your spells. That was a 7 torment window for the win. We have little guys coming up the stairs. The little guys are a great place for the rift. Should have delayed that a little bit. Star the little guys, really good damage grab. Holy Nova for fun. Okay, same idea here. We have time to kill, so I'm getting a healthy spread of dots. Using penance to spread my dots. Probably also want to get star out here. Let's see. No star. Okay, but here goes my pet. A little preemptive of the damage. Worked in my Radiance after my Rift. Really all you gotta do. And actually got an extra execute there. So picking up executes a lot of times. So I'm noticing, let me say that again, a lot of times a 5 torment window is really all we can get because our job as a healer comes first over these damaging torments. And a lot of times you do have to break from your rotation and essentially you're sacrificing torments. But if you're playing the mini game of catching executes, you can still hit that baseline of 6. And for this boss, we're tracking 2 attacks, the knockback, and then on his nameplate, I've queued in a weak R to monitor his energy. His major attack queues at 100%. All we really want, so we open with a full pet window and we do it prior to the darkness attack. Work in a Radiance prior to the darkness attack. Kind of held my Dark Reprimand for after the attack too, and the collapse did it all. And then also noticing on his nameplate, I brought in a weak R since my last video to track his energy bar on the nameplate. I think that's kind of the most sensible place to do it. But here comes the next Vicious Darkness. This is just a half rotation. We are kind of holding at this point. But the Rift is out before the attack. Got both of my penance into my Rift. And we're approaching the big damaging attack now. So full atonements in party. Barrier is down. And I stagger defensives. Maybe I shouldn't have. Oh yeah, I shouldn't have. I remember that death now. So a couple things in hindsight. I could have stayed in the barrier longer. I could have played Desperate Prayer longer. I think paint Sup on yourself there is a great idea. Let's see how I pick up the recovery here. So I'm going for a half rotation. We have quite a bit of time until the next attack. But we have these heal absorbs in group. We see that as the pinkish bar overlaying my frames. And for that Rapture, I cast a couple of shields early and then held the last set of them. because it'd be better to delay them and apply them late so that they cover this attack. And it looks like, actually I could have held a little longer. I don't think any of them worked. Okay, but that death honestly threw me off. I'm kind of having to sit on spells to make sure we have the Pet Rift on full energy. And I do believe, yeah, I paints up myself this time, not playing around. We have a Darkness for the win. Pet and Rift are out. Radiance after the Rift. Just making sure I hit my Torment spells. Letting the AoE healing do the rest. And with a couple of executes, thank God we got 7 Torments. Okay, so now we're just going for a damage grab. We can't send the pet. Too valuable of a spell. We don't want it on a long cooldown. Making sure I get both penance into my rift. Getting a couple of extra executes. Okay, that was it. So, lesson learned. I think I led into that death with just a Fade and Barrier. I probably should have Fade, Desperate Prayer, and Barrier. And then on the next one as a personal Paints Up, the one I lived. Or even on the first one, give myself a Paints Up. So I don't think Pinks need Paints Up there. And as a healer, it is just paramount that you live. So it's, you know, Fade is personal, Desperate Prayer is personal. You can always give yourself a personal shield. And then kind of being able to think of Paints Up as a personal too. Okay, so we have one group-wide attack. That's all I'm tracking on our nameplate. First order of business is get our pet out. And everyone was covered. So 8 seconds until the next attack. I'm kind of looking at my spells already. We're going to go for a half window. Just the Rift, that's really all we need. And let's see. So one thing I could have done better there, the Rift will honestly recover it all. But it's kind of a difficult mode of gameplay as a healer. But it's precasting. So a good idea here, if I just had a Rift window, which is weaker, is to make sure my Radiance cast falls after the damage, and in that one it landed before the damage. Okay, so we have damage immediately. I go into a Fade, Pet Rift with Vampiric Embrace, just to get some nice output to keep us healthy. And with a well-timed Rift there, the Rift collapsed after all of that damage, which is exactly what we want. And leading into this one, the pet is not ready. We go into a Rift and Rapture. And I think what I'm doing here is just delaying my half window just ever so slightly. No, actually, it looks like I'm going for a full. Okay, so on that one, a Desperate Prayer to get through. I kind of held for a full window. So maybe that's a good play there. Not real low shield. But yeah, a lot of times I'll do a full rotation, half rotation, kind of as a cycle. I'll get back to that idea, but replay that one if you want. So the Rift had quite a bit of time left on it, and this is something I've been toying with. People were too close to dying for me to wait for the Rift to collapse, and I kind of look at it as an off GCD heal that you can control. So what I did there is kind of collapse it early since health was getting low. The mob still had quite a bit of health, but a quick collapse, I think, prevented deaths. What was I saying before that? Oh, a lot of times it's full rotation, half rotation as a cycle, but sometimes I only go for fulls, and that's what I did there. Okay, so with this one, it's all about the timing. I have full atonements in party, and right as these splices coming out, I use that as kind of my marker. So here goes the splice, and we have a full healing window ahead of us. Fade is my defensive here. Five torments, and you kind of got to move on. Atonement on tank, and now all we get is a half rotation. So here goes the splice, right on time with my Rift. You really want it that delayed. And for this one, my coverage is Desperate Prayer. So if you notice with my defensives, it's kind of just a back and forth. And now we have a little bit of time to buy time. This is our tank kit. Noticing targeted cast will highlight when he's getting hit. Arguably, I think you could throw a rift there. Let's check on the next one. But it's better to kind of set up for your next damaging window. So I'm leading it with Long Atonements. Shield is last. Here goes Splice and Rift and Pet. So I have a full window at the start of the attacks. For this one, I pain set myself with Fade. And we did it. So now all we're going to get is a half rotation. I want to lead in with a couple generous atonements and party. Here goes the Splice, here goes the Rift. Working a Radiance. That's another pain set. And a Fade, just really wanted to live. So now we have some time to buy time. So Splice is 20 seconds away. We have Rift available. Yeah, okay, so I kind of wised up. So Rift is like a 18 or 19 second cooldown, and with the Splice 20 seconds away, we have time for one, and that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. So here comes the next Splice. The eyes out, leading it with Long Atonements. Shield was very last. Right on time for the Splice. And for that one, I ran both defensives and Vampiric Embrace, plus Barrier just to keep people up. And in these higher keys, it's really all about how you combo your spells. Not a bad idea to practice that in low keys. Okay, so this is just a half window. And we're about to have a small mistake here if we watch the timing of my spells. So incoming is our tank damage phase. My Rift is available in 3 seconds. And if you remember, like last time, at best, I should play my Rift now for a half rotation in the damage phase. But what happens, I think because we're in execute range, I go ahead and go for a full window, Pet and Rift. Trying to get an 8 Torment window here. But what happens is I totally fell off sync with the damage. And my output window is expiring now. So although I got an 8 Torment window, we had a death. But that was a pretty good run overall. Paladins came in real handy here with their utility spells. If you're really trying to stand out as a WoW player, it's doing more than just healing and damaging, it's playing utility. But remember, just a couple things to note if you're trying to really min-max your gameplay, is paying attention to all these different mini-games we have as a Disc Priest. Keeping our dots alive with penance, making sure we're switching targets to find executes, making sure we're falling back to our schism target with focus targeting, making sure we're casting Radiance after the Rift, making sure we're casting Radiance on the best person, and lastly, making sure we're timing our spells in the best manner. So if you're interested in a private lesson, please check out my Metafy. If you're interested in any of these UI elements, please consider joining the channel as a member. I would really appreciate it. If you have any questions in the meantime, I do pretty good at responding to the comments down below. But with all that being said, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, Disc out.